But straight ahead, 33-year-old Army Reserve veteran Tim Hale was released from the D.C. jail after spending nearly 3 years incarcerated for nonviolent offenses stemming from January 6, 2021, the riots at the Capitol therein. Tim was one of many political prisoners used by the weaponized Biden administration Justice Department. There are many more incarcerated or facing prison time. As President-elect Trump returns to the White House, the future is looking brighter for these Americans and their families. Tim will join us coming up right after the break. We'll get a little perspective on him, on what he would like to see accomplished, what we're being told from President-elect Trump and the transition team, and what lies ahead for these political prisoners. I hope you will stay with us as we get this edition of the Vicki Mckenna Show up and running. Stay tuned. Keeping it real, keeping it right. It's the Vicki Mckenna Show with yours truly, Matt Kittle, coming up in just a bit, just after 2:30. Conversation with American Majorities, Matt Batesel. He's the executive director. We're going to talk about ground game and the success that ballot chasers on the conservative side had in this election, what it means moving forward. But now let's begin here. It is amazing to think all that Tim Hale and others have gone through. Hale was incarcerated for 16 months, following the January 6, 2021 Capitol riots and protest before he was finally given trial in a D.C. courtroom. For nearly a year, Hale, who spent 12 years as an Army reservist, was stuffed in solitary confinement 23 hours every day, ostensibly because of COVID at the time. Tim Hale has hope now. So do other family members and the people who are serving time in prisons or looking to do so because of their presence as political prisoners. Tim Hale joins us now on the Vicki Mckenna Show. Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm doing phenomenal. Thank you so much for having me back on. It's great to talk to you again.
Absolutely. Very good to talk to you, too. I know that this must feel like a happier Thanksgiving time, some things to be thankful for with the sea change election that will hopefully lead to some people being released from custody on this massive weaponization of the Department of Justice in general. How are you feeling right now as things stand?
I mean, it's quite it's a strange feeling, you know. It's surreal because it's been nearly 4 years. But I like to say that the wheels of justice turn slowly, but the wheels of tyranny always come to a halt. So I'm hopeful for the future. I'm so excited that the God Emperor is finally taking back the throne, so to speak. I think most in the January 6th world have a lot of hope for the future now that the administration is changing, and I think a lot of people are going to be made whole again, and I can't wait for that, especially for my friends who are still locked up.
Absolutely. The good sign is that President-elect Donald Trump has already met with the group. What the work that you have been doing with the Patriots over these last several years, they have kept the home fires burning. They've kept the message out there that this was a travesty of justice in so many ways. But a lot can change in politics. I would imagine that you folks are trying to keep the heat on.
Well, absolutely. And I mean, not for nothing, this is not over because, it might seem insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but, there are still holidays that defendants' families are still trying to get through. I mean, we're still trying to keep the fire on for families for Thanksgiving and Christmas. Patriot Freedom Project is, over a dozen families now have been helped for the holidays, and it doesn't stop. So hopefully within a couple months, the breadwinners will be back home, so to speak, and the families will be reunited. But yeah, I mean, we have to keep up the pressure, and we have to keep up hope, because a lot of people are languishing in conditions they shouldn't be in. A lot of families have been broken up. Children haven't seen their fathers. Even mothers are incarcerated. I mean, it is a humanitarian disaster, and it's a horrible precedent that's been set. I wouldn't wish it even upon the left.
Are there lessons finally learned? It seems to me that the Biden-Harris administration, the Department of Justice, they've only redoubled their efforts. And, of course, we're concerned about trucks pulling up next to the DOJ, looking to destroy some records. Are you confident that the people who perpetrated this politically driven prosecution, investigation, will they be held accountable?
I'm not confident of anything until I see it happen. But I would like to think that once the right people are in play, unfortunately, we're having this conversation right on the aftermath of Matt Gaetz withdrawing his name from Attorney General, our consideration for the DOJ. Right. So nothing is certain until Trump gets back into office and he actually fills these departments with the right people. But I'm hopeful that once we get control of the Department of Justice, Homeland Security, and the DOD, we'll have a fuller understanding of how many confidential human sources, how many federal assets, how many plainclothes agitators were on the grounds that day. And I think we'll have a better understanding of how January 6th escalated the way it did. And I think generally the public understands that this was not the organic thing that it was portrayed as, that this was some orchestrated thing by Trump. I think most people know that. But if we can get our hands on the documents, if we can find out the names of the people who actually did this, I think that's going to help close up the wounds of the past few years. And I think it'll also, in a way, it'll be a reverse precedent. January 6th and the witch hunt that came after it was a horrible precedent for our common law system. But I think that if we can reveal the inner workings of how they orchestrated it, I think it'll reverse the precedent in the sense that it will show that they'll never be able to get away with this sort of thing again. Or at the very least, there will be consequences for trying to orchestrate such a thing. So I'm hopeful. At the end of the day, that's all I can have in my station currently is just have hope and, just pay attention. But I would like to think that they're not going to allow this to subvert their administration a second time. They can't.
Tim Hale joining us on the Vicki Mckenna Show. We're talking about all those people deemed insurrectionist by a political machine at the Department of Justice under Biden, Harris, Merrick Garland, the Attorney General. You brought up the Attorney General, Tim, and I wanted to get your thoughts a little bit more on that. Matt Gaetz was the pick, and we say that in past tense now, was the pick of Donald Trump to be the Attorney General. And then the left did what the left does. The Democrat Party machine does what the Democrat Party machine. Unfortunately, some weak-kneed Republicans in the Senate are probably to blame for this withdrawal as well. How do you feel about that moving forward? You obviously have a chief executive, a president-elect, who is promised to rectify this situation. But it's going to take the support of the Senate in terms of appointees to make sure that the work gets done.
Well, I mean, I think this is really a symptom of something we've known for a long time, which is that the Republican Party, at least at the highest levels, is really just an institution of controlled opposition. And this is why, for the longest time, I've been a Trump supporter, but I'm an independent. And so I look at the Republicans, I look at the party, and I see that Trump has transformed it on the surface. And throughout the country, he's really remade it in his image. And I don't think a lot of these people would get elected if it wasn't for Trump being on the ticket. And yet they are completely ungrateful for that, and they are just not working towards the interests of the public. I mean, he has a mandate. It's not close like it was in 2016. beyond the Electoral College. He won the popular vote by a substantial margin. Everybody wants a return to normalcy, and yet you have the aristocrats of the Senate who just don't want to yield any power. And so, they're basically outing themselves as the swamp creatures, so to speak. But, we can't let up pressure on them because they're just going to stonewall his administration, just like what happened after 2016. Trump was sandbagged by the Republicans in the Congress. They had both houses, and they didn't want to do anything to advance his agenda. I'm worried about that happening again. I'm hopeful that he'll be able to negotiate and work with a new generation, let's say new blood in Congress. But those elements are still going to be in there. Just because Mitch McConnell's going away from the leadership role doesn't mean that the Mitch McConnells of the world won't try to subvert him at every moment. So I just, again, this is a time for people not to get complacent. Just because we won this recent election doesn't mean that it's going to get easy. It's going to get even harder, because now the resistance is going to start kicking in within the corrupt elements that Trump was chosen to fight. So in terms of Attorney General, in terms of all that, I've always been a Federalist. I've always been I've always believed that the president and the presidency are unitary. The executive branch is not supposed to be divided against itself like the legislative. And so I've always been a firm believer that those who are employed by the executive branch must serve the interests and the will of the president within the constitutional reason. But he cannot have people in the executive branch who are subverting his will like last time. He needs to clean house, and he needs to actually force through his agenda, because he's going to get resistance as it is in the legislature. So hopefully he has an eye on all the snakes.
Lots of snakes to keep an eye on, lots of swamp creatures. Yes. Speaking of which, for those who think that Mitch McConnell is somehow going away into that good night, just look for the fingertips on the strings of John Thune, the new speaker, the new majority president, I should say, majority leader. Real quick, just a few seconds left. Tell us about the Patriot Group and what you're trying to accomplish.
Well, the Patriot Freedom Project was founded by my family while I was incarcerated in the D.C. Gulag. And the mission of the Patriot Freedom Project was to help families pay their bills while their loved ones were incarcerated. Because a lot of these were wives with children, and unfortunately the breadwinner was locked up. And so you had women who were taking on 2-3 jobs to support their children. And we could go into a lot more than that, but to keep it short, we founded this 501c3 to help support the families of those who've been caught up in January 6th, as well as to provide, legal counsel for those who were getting basically bent over by the public defender's office. We've been doing this for over 3 years, coming on 4 years now, and it's important that we keep going forward with this. Unfortunately, like I just said, Thanksgiving is still coming up. Christmas is still coming up. The holidays are still here. It's not over. These families are still suffering. And so if anybody wants to help support January 6th defendants and their families, they can go to patriotfreedomproject.com, and they can make a huge difference in the lives of those who are suffering because of this administration. And I thank everybody who does.
Excellent. And you folks have made a big difference, and we're very thankful for that this Thanksgiving. Wish you nothing but the best moving forward, and God bless all of those who are still languishing away in jail and prisons on trumped-up charges in a political, weaponized prosecution. Be well, and God bless, my friend.
Thank you. God bless you.
You bet. Tim Hale, 33-year-old Army Reserve veteran and part of the great Patriot Freedom Project. He knows about this issue firsthand.